Hi, well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. And freedom of speech is really, really important. And in homage to another great, whatever else he was a great fighter for the freedom of speech, Christopher Hitchens, I would like to start by shouting, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" No calamity? Nobody's been trampled to death? Why? Is it perhaps because each and every one controls our actions regardless of what stimuli we're exposed to? This is self-responsibility. It's self-ownership, where you are responsible to yourself for your own action. It is part of our culture that goes back long to the Greek roots, back to ancient Greece, and then through Christianity, which in Europe amalgamated with the ancient Greek thought and created a society which is based on reason. And that is at the core of it. But in order to have reason, you have to have the language to help you express ideas and put them down and shape them so that people can understand them. You can teach them to your children. They can learn what they mean. And that is why language and speech is so important. The phrase, falsely calling fire in a crowded theater, comes from a decision of Schneck versus United States back in 1919, where the opinion for the majority was written by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. Sorry, these English names are confusing. They don't have enough consonants in the names. And this was during a case where during the World War I, some guys were putting out flyers advocating for a general strike to stop the production of weapons because they were for peace or whatever. And this was seen as putting the country in imminent danger, and therefore it justified, according to Wendell Holmes, their limitation on their freedom of speech. Later on, that same year, there was another case, again, about freedom of speech, where a couple of Russian anarchists who had escaped from Russia into the United States did not want the United States to enter World War I in order to oppose the Russian Revolution. And so they were trying to hand out flyers in English and in Yiddish, actually throwing them out of a factory window, urging people to be for peace and try to stop the U.S. getting involved in the military conflict itself. And in this case, Oliver Wendell Holmes held that this was just a couple of cranks doing out flyers. They had no power to affect anyone, so they should be permitted to have their freedom of speech. He was in the minority. They did get convicted and served 10 or 15 years in jail for these flyers. But a lot of people are thinking that Justice Holmes had changed his opinion a lot between the two. There's a lot of discussion about it. But in modern times, in order to, I guess, balance it out, there is another precedent for limitation on the freedom of speech that's being cited, and that's the Brandenburg versus Ohio case from 1969, where the wording is a little more specific, and it says that the government has the right to curb speech which incites imminent lawless action. And that is the only speech that it is supposed to be able to limit. Now, the problem we have here, and it goes back to the language, is the word incite. If you look up what the word means, it means to encourage, to stir up violent or unlawful behavior, but implied in that is that you're the one who's urging for that behavior. If I go to somebody and say, "You there, go lynch that guy, he did so and so, you go kill him," I'm inciting violence against him, right? If I'm saying, "That guy said something bad about your mother," I may be guilty of slander, but I'm not inciting violence because I have no control over how he will react to that information. As we are moving here in our society, we're seeing more and more that the word incite is being twisted in the way it's being used. And it's being used as a form to provoke. And it's making the speaker responsible for how the audience will react to their speech. And this is patently ridiculous because, yes, certainly some people are persuasive and you get real firebrands and they can rabble-rouse and all that. But at the end, we each own ourselves and each and every one of us is responsible for our actions. And we cannot abdicate that responsibility. It is the basis of our society. Perhaps not every society, but our society is based on that. And we must never permit that to be taken away from us. Because on the principle of self-ownership is where all of our rights and freedoms spring from. Now, one of the current and most terrible limitations on our freedom of speech that has been coming up in Canada lately is Quebec's Bill C-59. I'm sure you have all heard a little bit about it, but from what I have been able to glean, my understanding is that Premier, and again, weird French name, again, way too many vowels, not enough consonants, Couillard believes that Muslim terrorism is caused by criticism of Islam. Therefore, if you ban criticism of Islam, you get rid of terrorism. And it's for public safety and good. And that is the reasoning behind Bill C-59. And even though it does not in the bill itself name specifically Islam, it does limit speech, and the government authorities have let it be known that anybody who criticizes Islam will be prosecuted under these laws. Well, it's stopping terrorism. It's stopping terrorism. You can't let people be terrorists. I mean, they're inciting violence by making the terrorists angry. Of course, hate speech laws are not just useless, they're worse than useless. They are absolutely dangerous. Okay, this is not an online forum, so please don't call Godwin Law on me, but I'm going to go back to Weimar Republic and Hitler. Weimar Republic had hate speech laws which are remarkably similar to the ones we have in Canada now. And the Jewish Jewish society representatives were very comfortable with those, and were very happy, and they said that those were excellent tools excellent and necessary tools for curbing anti-Semitism. And they absolutely loved them and wanted to have them kept. And indeed, many Nazis did get jailed and spend years in jail for inciting anti-Semitism. But once they got in power, and don't forget, they were elected into power, they used those same hate speech laws to silence any dissent, any mention of anything that would help build opposition against them. And, you know, I know this is kind of scary, but we are seeing it now, that people are being silenced because they have the wrong political idea, because they hold unpopular views. They're being silenced because they're haters. And I can't express just how frightening it is to see it coming, because as Beth mentioned, I was born and raised on the wrong side of the Iron Curtain. But there, it was quite obvious that the censorship was imposed. People knew it, they saw it, they felt the shackles. Here, when it comes through much more subtle and slippery channels, it's no longer shackles you see being put on you. A lot of people do not see them as shackles at all. They just think that that's what it means to be a good person and a good citizen, and everybody wants to be a good person and a good citizen. So they put on these shackles all by themselves and think them beautiful bracelets. And that's the problem. People do not rise up against things if they don't know they are there. They can't protect themselves to dangers they have no idea are looming over them, right? And that is in Weimar Republic, sorry, I get sidetracked, the Article 118 of the Weimar Republic states, no censorship will take place. But they made two exceptions to it. Law for the protection of youth from trash and filth writings, and then the hate speech laws. Those were the only two limitations on the freedom of speech in the Weimar Republic. And they were used to censor all forms of art that Nazis did not approve of, and they were used to censor all forms of speech that the Nazis did not approve of. We must learn from history, or as my history teacher told me, he says, I would have to repeat it. Back to Bill C-59 in Quebec. The Bill C-59 in Quebec did not come out of nowhere. It is the result of a long-term pressure being applied by an organization called the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, formerly known as the Organization of Islamic Congress. This is the second largest extra-governmental organization in the world, second only to the United Nations. It composes of 57 Muslim nations, majority Muslim nations. I believe North Korea is in there as well, and the Palestinian Authority. And they make up the largest voting bloc in the United Nations. And actually, sorry, out of order. And again, they want to have consultative and cooperative relationship with the UN and other intergovernmental organizations. And one of their stated goals is safeguarding true values of Islam and taking steps to remove misconceptions and have strongly advocated the elimination of discrimination against the Muslims in all forms and manifestations. Now, we must again go back to language, because in our understanding of the word slander, we believe that it has to be a false statement. But that is because we are a society that's rooted in reason and reality. We use the scientific method to determine what is true and what isn't true. The Islamic society is based on completely different concepts. And in their concept of slander, slander means saying anything that a person would not like to have said about them. So a slander of Islam would be saying anything that might not put Islam in a favorable light. And we must understand that when they say slander Islam, that is the meaning that they are using. And if we don't understand what it is they're saying, it's our own lookout that we're saying, oh yeah, well, of course, free speech, as long as it's not slander, yeah, we can live with that. But we don't understand that in their eyes, we just promised we would not permit anyone to say anything that might not make Islam look positive, whether it's true or not. And that's a big problem. Again, just to show the pattern, in the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, from 1976, there is a general comment number 34, amending it from the year 2011, and it states, prohibitions of displays of lack of respect for a religion or other belief system, including blasphemy laws, are incompatible with the covenant. Meaning, according to the United Nations, blasphemy is good, fine. Nobody must forbid it. It can be stopped. It's part of our heritage, and we need it. Can't do anything about it. But then again, one arm of the government says what we think is going to safeguard our rights and freedoms. The other one doesn't. United Nations Human Rights Commission had adopted a resolution entitled Combating Defamation of Religions. And their purpose is to eliminate the elimination of all forms of intolerance and discrimination based on religion. And here we have another one of those words that has been changing its meaning so that it I don't think this word means what you think it means. We used to think that tolerance meant, okay, you have your religion and practice your way. I have my religion, I will practice my way. You don't push your stuff on me. I won't push my stuff on you. Yeah, I don't believe what you're saying. To me, it's a load of dingoes' kidneys, but yeah, we'll come to them. Have some kidney pie, right? But nowadays, it has morphed. Intolerance is now being used when you do not value somebody else's beliefs and religious values the same way as you do your own. So instead of saying, okay, do what you will, onto others as you would do onto yourself, we now have, you must put their beliefs on par with yours, regardless of whether they are morally sound, whether you agree with them. And this moral relativism is leading a lot of our young people into stagnation, where they are looking for structure. They are looking for someone to say, this is right and this is wrong, and we mean it. They're looking for this certainty. And do you know where they find it? In the mosques. They're not afraid to say, this is right and this is wrong. And that is how a lot of young people who seek structure and moral guidance end up indoctrinated and fighting for ISIS. Okay, I'm oversimplifying it, but the principle holds. We have to be very careful how we communicate, because nowadays all forms of communication are being censored. Oh, sorry, I forgot to bring this out. I don't know if you've read or seen this book. It's called Easy Meat. It's by Peter McLaughlin. And it is a really, really thorough study of how the sex grooming scandals, gangs in England were permitted to rape underage girls and arrested their parents who would try to save them. And the reason for this was they were afraid of being called racist. They were afraid of criticizing the values of these Muslim men who are pedophiles and sadists.
Asian gangs.
Oh, yes, they call them Asian gangs. But that's a euphemism because...
I would like to say one thing.
Yes?
What you just said about the Cologne attacks.
Yes?
Everybody know that?
Yeah.
They have not convicted one, and they've actually released many.
No surprise.
Yes. The Cologne attacks. The rape, they actually arrested one person and then they let him go. Yeah, that is, and this is part of it. And these, in order to tell the story, the author actually has to dig really, really deep. Have you heard of EDL, English Defense League? It's an organization founded by Tommy Robinson for protecting British values, English values, right? And they were absolutely vilified, and there were apparently at one point racial tensions with violence, and they are implicating EDL in it. Well, it turns out that if you line it up, the EDL people were trying to stand up to the grooming gangs that were raping their children, and the police were arresting them for violence against Muslims and hate crimes. By the way, the indigenous Brits were not the first group that tried to protect their young girls. The first group that was targeted were Sikh girls. And the Sikhs took the violence into their own hands, but because Sikhs tend to not be melatonin challenged, arresting them was out of the question. So things got squared off and the Sikh girls were off the menu. But the other girls, they were easy meat. And you'd think with this, the British government, this is, the land of the Magna Carta, will not protect its children because somebody might think they're haters. But on the other hand, they have perfectly lots and lots of time to protect people from all kinds of things. The police are saying, violent or offensive tweets will be prosecuted. Just today I heard about this guy. Oh, can't find the name of it right now. But he's in England. He was arrested. No, the other one. I'll go to get Bukowski. I'm just getting there in stages because it's too strong to just dive in there. This guy has a girlfriend who has a pug. And the pug is utterly adorable. And the girlfriend says, "Oh, there's nothing you can do to make my pug not adorable." Boyfriend said, "Challenge accepted." And he videos the pugs, they twist their head like this, right? And so he'd say things like, "Gas the Jews." When the dog would be stretching his arm forward, he'd say, "Heil Hitler." And made a video of these compilations. They're obviously meant to be funny and to annoy his girlfriend. Challenge accepted, right? They arrested him for it. They actually arrested him. And they said it was as an example to others so they wouldn't transgress and make such hateful videos. John Cleese has said he would never be allowed to make the movie Life of Brian now. A lot of comics are refusing to go on university campuses. Anyway. As you were mentioning, this builds up to even worse. And this strikes close to home because, again, this person also is from behind the Iron Curtain. A gentleman named Bukowski. He was like another Solzhenitsyn, just slightly less known. He went through the Gulag. He escaped. He wrote about it. He's a Soviet dissident, a prolific thinker, a really good guy, okay? And Putin's not too fond of him. And for some reason, and read into this what you will, he is being tried for possessing and making child pornography. He's in his 70s, and he claims he's absolutely innocent, but the breaches of law and procedure that they have used to get at his things, to shoehorn him into this prosecution, are unimaginable. And he didn't know quite how to fight back, so he thought the best way would be to have his case heard in court as well. So he is suing the prosecution for slander. And he asked that his prosecution of the prosecution be tried before the criminal trial, because he believes that his case is absolutely essential to his defense of his good name. Well, that has been denied. This man in his 70s is now, as of today, on his 21st day of a hunger strike. And nobody knows about it because British courts have imposed a media ban on it. They're not even allowed to report that that his request for the trial to be moved up so he could clear his name was postponed, was denied. They're not allowed to report on it at all. Why? Why would somebody accused of child pornography, whether he's guilty or not, need to be news blacked out? What is there for implications of national security in that? But that is the mindset that we are dealing with. We prosecute this guy on faked or trumped up charges of child prostitution, child pornography, while we permit whole-scale child prostitution by people whom we are afraid to criticize because they are a privileged class with a protected status. This is not the rule of law where each individual is equal in the eyes of the law. This is not part of our reason-based system. We have lost somehow our way. And it is not surprising because it wasn't accidental. There is a school of thought called the Frankfurt School because it started in Frankfurt, but then it moved to the US. And these thinkers, they were communists, and they were very upset that the Soviet Revolution happened in Russia. Because according to the Marxist theory, you have different evolutions of a society, and capitalism comes before communism. Well, Russia was a feudal country before it became communist. They skipped the capitalist stage and went straight to communism, and that's not supposed to happen according to Marx. And these guys also learned how violent revolutions tend to eat their own children, devour their own children. So they decided that a slow and steady incremental change is necessary. They derived this school of thought that took, well, Marx's original teachings were class-based, right? But what they did is, instead of class, they reinterpreted culture through the Marxist lens and developed something called critical theory. And that is the root of political correctness. It is the root of putting Islam above everything else. It is the root of fourth-wave feminism, gay rights movements, not just for equality, but past equality. All these things, all these seemingly different things, gender studies, identity studies, Chicano study, these are all different battering rams, if I may borrow that expression, against our civilization, and whose only goal is to bring down Western civilizations because it is, according to them, immoral, because people who have abilities succeed more than people who don't. That is all a big orchestrated thing, and political correctness is one of the tools that is being used by all these different streams. All these different battering rams are using similar tools, and you can see it cookie cutter. You know, it's a portable system. You can just change, slightly tweak the language for this, tweak the language, and it's the same thing. And we are seeing that. And right now, our society is really, really beginning to crumble. Because if you do not have application of law equally, you cannot have a basis for society where people feel secure. It is the end of the civilization that our forefathers have built and bled for and died for. And we must stand up and take it back, because I have no idea how many centuries it will be before it is rediscovered. State of freedom is not a natural state for a human society. What we are living in is not the norm. It is a beautiful exception. And I am afraid that this particular exception is beginning to collapse in on itself, and it saddens me to no end. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. People in Europe have come to recognize their governments as being not just corrupt, as they thought before, but actively treasonous. And they're beginning to organize. These are the so-called far right-wing groups. And I would like you to judge for yourself. I have full disclosure, I helped them with the English. This is from the Pegida Denmark web page, www.pegidadenmark.com. And I'd like to read to you there who we are and what we stand for. We are individual citizens who wish to live in peace in our countries, under the rule of law, and in the spirit of the Magna Carta, respecting constitutions which guarantee our inalienable human rights to life and liberty. We cherish our most fundamental right to life and demand that governments live up to their obligation to protect it by applying the rule of law equally to everyone, regardless of gender or any other consideration. We recognize that in order to maintain our rights, we must first and foremost defend our right to unfettered freedom of speech. Without it, there are no peaceful means to defend our other fundamental human rights. As such, we insist on our right to criticize governments, government policies, and politicians. As such, we insist on our right to criticize ideologies and philosophies and those who espouse or promote them. As such, we insist on our right to criticize religious beliefs, religious figures, and religious practices. As such, we insist on our right to criticize cultures and cultural practices. These are not simply our rights, these are the duties of every citizen. Thank you. This is considered right-wing extremism in Europe today.
It would be here too.
We have some Facebook pages with the Pedica.
Yeah. And well, I have tried a little bit on my own to add to this more freedom of expression. Have any of you heard of the International Dra Mohammed Day? No. Yeah, okay. A number of years ago, a political cartoonist had thought, okay, well, with all those murderous rampages through the world because of the Danish cartoons, the only way to avoid something like this happening and happening regularly is for everybody to draw Muhammad, because then the risk is shared by everyone. Well, Molly Norris was her name. She's in hiding. Nobody knows if she's alive or dead. But since then, every May 20th has been International Dra Mohammed Day. Last year, I thought I'd test the state of freedom of speech in Canada, and I applied for a permit on Parliament Hill, to hold, at the occasion of the International Dra Mohammed Day, I wanted to have an equal opportunity blasphemy day. I wanted to have some paper and markers and crayons and have people come and draw any political or religious figure they would like, freely on the Hill, to prove that we still have the right to do this. They talked to me, everything was, yeah, no problem, okay, this, oh, well, there might be some problem with this, move the day a little bit, move the time a little bit, okay, well, you know, where the central location is, it might be too difficult, could we put you a little bit to the side? And, okay, fine, no. Everything I agreed to. I said, okay, well, the last hurdle is to have a meeting with the RCMP, and if they deem that you're a good risk, you'll get your permit and you can hold it. So I meet with the RCMP, and the sergeant in Rousseau, who's in charge of the security of the whole Hill, says, yeah, you're a good risk. Tell you what, go ahead, start promoting your event, you have the permit. I'll just make sure they get it to you within a couple of hours. So, okay, I believed him. The permit didn't come. I started promoting it, and people started talking about it, and there was quite a bit of buzz, and no permit was coming, and the next day, nothing. I started asking more frantic all the time. Finally, at about a little after 5 o'clock on the day before the demonstration was supposed to be held, I get a phone call telling me my permit has been denied. Okay. Oh, and I was also told that if I showed up on the Hill anyways, I would probably be arrested. Okay, fine. I wasn't going to give up that easily. I couldn't have it on the Dra Mohammed Day. Okay, that was too big a pill to swallow. So I kept coming back and saying, well, what if I did this? What if I did an equal opportunity blasphemy day, but not on a Dra Mohammed Day? Would that work? No. Okay, so what if and I gave them a number of scenarios, and we negotiated for months. Finally, because a lot of universities have been having these free speech walls, where students come and write whatever they want, and I framed it in that, and I supplied materials on how this is supported on even the most PC campuses. And I don't mean progressive conservative, I mean politically correct. They finally said, okay, but lots of logistics. Couldn't have what I originally had designed. I was limited to a table like this with 3 little poster boards, and that was it. And I had to post on it all the restrictions, the laws on hate speech laws in Canada. That all had to be in English and in French, had to be, because I couldn't lead somebody astray and cause them to be arrested through their ignorance. The last thing before I got my permit granted to me was again meeting with the RCMP, and this time on Parliament Hill, on the site. that I was supposed to have it. It was a little bit out of the way, but still okay, fine. It was on the lawn, but they said, you know, there's like cordons off area, but they said they would lower the cordon so people would know they can come in there and everything would be said, okay, fine. As long as I have it, right? As long as it goes on, I'm happy. They said, yeah, okay. I actually did get the permit for the 13th of September, and I went there and I held my free speech wall. And the way they did the setup was I was really far up in the corner, right towards the eastern block, at the very northeast corner of the Parliament Hill. And they did have it cordoned off with the ropes, but they didn't want to lower them once I was there because that would have been a security risk. And they posted an RCMP officer right across the street from where people would have to cross the rope. And anybody who approached it, he tried to make sure that I was being secure. And people couldn't even read my display from the sidewalk. And they were afraid to come across. And of course, anybody who would have been disabled or had a baby buggy or anything wouldn't have been able to come because it was not accessible. So anyway.
That was before the election.
And that yes, and that was before the election. And I understand that somebody relatively high up made it clear that this event is going to go on. And that's why I ended up getting my permit. But I don't know who. But I understand it was relatively high up. I was told that no other demo had ever gone that high up before for approval. So anyway, I have a continuation to the saga. This year, I made an application for an event on Parliament Hill to be held on May 20th. I would have it exactly the same way I had it last year in September, exactly the same equipment, exactly the same conditions. I would like to be closer to where the people are, but otherwise absolutely identical, and I want to have it, and let's do it. And you know, I have a proven track record. There was no cataclysm. Nobody came out shooting with AKs or anything. There was no demonstration. Nobody wrote anything hateful. So I have a track record, right? Well, yesterday, I got my permit. I will have a free speech wall on Parliament Hill on the 20th of May, the International Dra Muhammad Day. There's only one limitation. From noon to 2 p.m. Thank you. Thank you. There's only one limitation. I'm not allowed to have the table I had or a chair to sit on. And I'm not allowed to have any structure that people could write or draw on. That's the only limitation. I'm allowed to have small handheld signs. It's an opportunity. I'm going to ask as many of you as can to come. I'll have little signs, and I would ask each and every one of you to be a brick in the wall and hold a small handheld sign that will make up a free speech wall. Are you in? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That would be most excellent. Let's do it. Thank you.
Questions?
I just comment, I read in the paper on the Sunday day, whether anybody else saw it or not, about the mayor of England.
Oh.
East Islam, but the guy who supported him and said he's a good man and all that.
Yeah, I read it.
Anyway, he was killed, eh? They shot him.
What?
I did not hear that.
Yeah, that's right.
The new mayor of London's already been shot.
No. The guy who supported him and said, you know, he was supporting him in principle, like, he's a good man. People were afraid, we got an Islam man. And he was saying, no, he's a good man. He'll be good for, you know, do the job well. Well, the guy who said that, they shot him.
Yeah.
Who shot him?
Yeah.
Well, some of these people behind, like she's talking, behind the scenes that.
Well,
Why would they shoot him and we're promoting somebody that was Muslim?
yeah. But this particular Muslim
They didn't like him.
mayor has.
Somebody didn't like him, but I wouldn't say it
Yeah.
was Islam.
I don't know.
No, it doesn't make sense. If an Islamic person didn't like him for actually promoting this fellow,
Yeah.
why would he shoot him? It's
I don't know, I'd like to find
somebody
out
who
about that.
isn't from Islam who did that.
Unless he crossed somebody completely unrelated.
I think if you read the article
Either
Yeah,
that,
you
or
read it
somebody
again.
will eventually maybe do harm to him, I don't know.
Okay. Just one little remark I'd like to make. This particular Muslim mayor of London has called moderate Muslims Uncle Toms. Okay. Now, the first hand that was raised was way in the back, please.
I wanted to say something about the mayor of London. He said something to Trump. He said, look, Trump, if you go along with your Islamic banning, then Muslims will attack. That is a chilling warning from an official. And Sadiq Khan has ties to extremism in his family. These are things people don't know. Can you repeat that?
Oh, yes, I should repeat that. Sadiq Khan, the newly elected mayor of London, has said to Donald Trump, if you implement your even temporary ban on admitting Muslims to the United States, Muslims will attack. A chilling warning from somebody who says he is a moderate.
Trump's the kind of guy who would attack back.
Yes?
Alexandra, your examples are excellent, but they're in England. The same thing does happen in Canada. I can't really start rhyming off events, but every time there's some kind of protest about Palestinians, the BDS demonstrations on university campuses and what have you, wherever there's people who disagree with them, they are the people that the police go after.
Yeah. Janice Fiamenko, a professor of literature at Ottawa U, and who also is a member of a men's rights group, was trying to give a speech. Students shouted her down, and the police would not stop the students from shouting her down. And when they tried to go to a different room where the disruptive students weren't, somebody pulled a fire alarm. But of course, there are people who are being seriously persecuted. And example of Frida Minion and the Fourniers, Mark and Connie Fournier, comes to mind. They're not being prosecuted criminally. They're being prosecuted by our tort laws in civil court for defamation or slander or whatever. And the problem, and this is another really, really important problem we have to know. In our courts, you are proven innocent, you are innocent until proven guilty. Except in defamation. In defamation laws, you are guilty and presumed guilty until proven innocent. And what's worse, malice is assumed unless you can disprove it. That is our current law. And that is why many, I must really be careful on this language so I do not get sued. Silly bunnies take it upon themselves to find people who speak truth and are unafraid, and they sue them into oblivion. Defending one of these lawsuits costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and even if you win, you don't necessarily get awarded costs.
You won't.
That's what happened to the Fourniers versus Dr. Dog.
Human rights tribunals operate that.
But this wasn't a human rights tribunal. This was civil court, Elgin Street, right here in Ottawa. I was there. I blogged it.
It's called lawfare.
It is called lawfare, or SLAP, Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. And we need to stop it because there is no penalty associated with falsely dragging people through the courts, expensive for decades. The process is the punishment. They don't care if they win. They win by bankrupting you, by forcing you to use your energy and your resources to defend yourself instead of to fight for your cause.
And to add, it's too bad that conservatives and people who like free speech are generally wealthier.
That is true, but I think that a lot of us are not necessarily rich. They're not necessarily. No, liberals tend to not be particularly poor. We have a privileged class of mostly liberal people who work for the government and in whose interest it is that status quo remains, and they have no idea how regular Canadians live. Well, I am in Ottawa. We know how it is. We've all met them, right?
I think the loudest though are the liberals with lots of free time on their hands and no work.
Yes. Yes?
Yeah.
On another note, which is about freedom of speech, all of the journalists that were brought on a bus tour of Fort Mac
Oh, yeah.
this week had to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Why?
Well, it is a military institution. If they saw militarily significant things that,
Like them trying to get guns out of people's houses?
yeah, no,
Like what? We're talking a forest fire.
yeah, no.
It's not military?
No, I thought, oh, sorry, I got confused with, no, that wasn't a military base nearby there, no?
Cold Lake is military.
That's what I was thinking.
North of, I guess that's
sorry.
north or south of that, I don't know.
My mistake, I apologize.
No.
No, so you're right, you're right.
There's no reason.
There is no reason.
Why would reporters not report
Well,
what they see? That's what they're supposed to do.
we all know what happened in Deep River, right? I'm sorry, High River. High River. They used a natural disaster as a means of confiscating people's guns and just absolutely violating the civil liberties.
Yeah, absolutely.
It should. It should. But it can't if they no longer have the weapons.
In order to do that.
Oh, it's not hard to get weapons.
And that's why they're doing it. So who ordered the RCMP to do that, eh? Were the
You'll
liberals
never
involved?
find out.
It was on the conservatives' watch. I have no idea.
But they're damn fools if they actually think that by taking guns away from the population, that they're disarming the nation.
Yes, of course.
You
That
know,
was
the
the
rule,
gun
the
registry.
rule of revolution is, your intruder, the one with the gun, you get him and take his gun, that gun gets another and another, that's the way it works.
Yeah.
So this business about disarming a nation is impossible.
But they can disarm us if they
But they can do that.
take the tools of language.
Right?
If they take the tools of language, so we don't know that we
Well,
have to.
Stop you from knowing what's going on, and you're pretty much.
Well, Western society,
What we're dealing with today, we're dealing with suppressing
uh,
ideas that aren't politically correct.
that's right. And democracy cannot exist without an informed populace. Facebook, they have now had person who was working high up in Facebook admit that they intentionally hid stories with a conservative bend in them so that they wouldn't show up. This is happening. Google, they also admitted that they downgraded on their ratings sites or people who were eco-skeptics. These are things that are happening, and not just by governments. They are happening by governments and by industry in collusion with each other. Do you know what we call the collusion of government and industry? There is a technical term for this. It's called fascism. Collusion of government and big business is defined as fascism, whether left-wing or right-wing, doesn't matter. That's the definition of fascism.
Don't you think we're already there?
Yes, we are.
Oh, boy, we've been there a long time.
Yes?
I know tonight you're pretty focused on free speech and all that. Would you care to take a demographics-related question?
Sure.
Okay. At the Robert Spencer event, I was talking to Robert, and he had mentioned how we have to have more children. But I noticed how a lot of Western nations, once they dip below 2.2, 2.1 kids per family, they can only really, like, when they try to do things, you know, they can only really raise the birth rate by a little bit, like by, you know, a decimal place.
Yes.
But I thought, you know, maybe there's focus to be done on a lot of these Muslim countries where, you know, they're the top 4 most populous nations are Muslim and they still have over 6 kids per family. I thought maybe we could tackle that. And what does tackling that look like?
Well, I think that tackling that is getting women's organization to surreptitiously smuggle birth control pills to Muslim women so they can get some control over their own reproduction.
Well, wait a minute, they have to want to.
Yes. And many Muslim women don't. You are absolutely correct in that. And I would say that most of the Muslim women who live in the West and wear the fascist Islamist uniforms do not want to. They are fully on board with something that is called the jihad of the womb. And this is a very explicitly stated doctrine by many learned Islamic scholars to outbreed the rest of us. And I fully understand that, but there are some women in the Muslim world who would seize an opportunity at emancipation. And control over their own reproduction would be a good starting point. I'm not saying it's the solution. I'm saying It's the easiest step that we can implement.
So pills,
Impact.
Pills, anything else?
Well, I don't know if it's just the pills, but there's different shots that you can take that'll last for 3 months. So that might be easier to deliver, you know.
Anything outside medical?
Just keep them inside their own borders.
It's something that I have been wondering about for a little over a decade, and as soon as I figure it out, I'll tell you.
Well, it seems like every government from here on out, liberal or conservative, are going to continue with the third world immigration.
Because traditionally, people tend to vote for the government that brought them in, for the political party that brought them in.
Well, they tell them that in immigration. Yeah.
Can I speak to that?
Yes,
That's no longer true, and the proof is true though.
yes, that is correct.
The Muslims vote as an ummah, they don't give a shit about who brought them in anymore. The Muslims voted as a bloc. Look, until this election, Muslims never were above 30% of the vote. This election, they were over 80%. The amount, and this is not my number, this is a leftist newspaper celebrating that.
And our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that, you know, one day he goes to the Ahmadi Mosque, next day he goes to the Wahhabi Mosque. He posted about this. And he has prayed with the Muslims in their mosques, which, correct me if I'm wrong, means you need to recite the Shahada.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a conversion prayer.
Yeah.
I seriously believe it's not Christian.
I really don't care what he is. I just want to make it clear, whether he realizes it or not. Muslims believe that he has converted because he's prayed with them in the mosque and said the Shahada, and they are behaving accordingly. And if he does something that they deem un-Islamic, he's very likely to be a target for being killed as an apostate, for leaving Islam. This is a very dangerous game he's playing. I don't know if he's aware of it.
He's not aware, he's too stupid.
I don't know. I don't know anymore.
Pretty much,
Yes? Sorry.
Run out of questions. We're gonna have to run out of questions sometime this evening.
Freedom of speech.
Last question.
There's a lady that quietly holds up a sign against abortion.
Oh, yeah.
In the abortion, in front of the abortion clinics. They keep putting her in jail.
You are absolutely right, and that is an example I should have brought up. You are absolutely right. But tomorrow is the March for Life. I think a lot of people will be there because, you know, right to life and all. But yes, you're right. She is Canada's political prisoner.
All
Absolutely, absolutely.
she does is hold the sign. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And how many times has CBC ever reported it?
Politically correct.
Well, I think most of our newspapers are doing us a disservice. And I think that the best thing to do is to call them up and say, cancel my subscription, I don't believe in what you're doing anymore, go broke.
Yeah, I don't pick any paper.
People can retaliate against newspapers, you just say, keep your paper, I'm not paying for it anymore.
Yeah,
That's the way to do it.
yeah. Because the press is liberal. The press is liberal.
Yes, the press.
Oh, it's worse
the
than
pr-
that, politically correct.
Okay. It gets even worse than that. Remember when I was going about different battering rams? There is part of this Frankfurt school by a guy named Gramsci. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's Italian. It's got the wrong kind of vowels in there. Is something called the Long March Through the Institutions. The incrementalist communists, Marxists, had believed that in order to take over our society and break down the very foundations of our society, the best way is to train teachers to use teaching as a tool of subversion. Actually, Saul Alinsky, all of you have probably heard of him, one of his books, I have it on my shelf at home, is called Teaching as a Tool of Subversion. And they have patiently filled universities with people who are either on board with the program or useful idiots. And these people are indoctrinating our children into being good citizens. Yes.
Alexandra, I call these people Fabians. Fabians were the ones that founded the London School of Economics where Pierre Trudeau went.
Yes.
His mentor was Howard Lasky, a Fabian. And they believe in justifying your existence. They created the League of Nations, which became the United Nations,
Yeah.
and which are pushing agenda
Yes.
I know they go by different names. In Canada, it's the Douglas Caldwell Foundation. I don't know what they go with by over there, but to me, what you're describing is what I call socialism.
Yet another battering ram, all aiming at the foundation of our society. I hope I don't get accused of stealing somebody's words by using that phrase.
So how can we fight this?
As soon as I figure it out, I'll let you know. But I will start by being on the Hill on May 20th, between 12 and 2, and be a little brick in that wall of resistance.
But the best way to fight it is to speak up.
Yes. And the more of us speak, the more we spread the danger and the punishments.
Yeah, that's the way you do it. Raise your voice, be heard. And when a politically correct person comes to you and faults you for doing it, spit in their eye. No, seriously. Show them what you do, that you mean business. Okay, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break now. I said a 10 on the list.
Thank you.
Let's go for 5.
Thank you.
I don't know if you've ever seen this magazine.
Oh.